Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Jeff Wright and I'm the CEO of Urban Ministries Incorporated. And we're here today to talk about returning to school and supporting teachers. We got two incredible guests, Marilyn Rhames, who's the founder of Teachers Who Pray, and Dr. Emory Berry Jr., who's the pastor of Green Forest Community Baptist Church. Let's pray and get started with an exciting conversation today.
Sure.
Father God, we do thank you for your grace, your mercy, your goodness, and for technology, which allows us to bring people together from around the country and around the world to discuss important topics, to inform us, enlighten us, and to help us be better prepared to live in these interesting times that we're in. Bless our guests and bless this time together, Lord. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Marilyn Rhames is the founder of Teachers Who Pray. She is an author, a speaker. She is a teacher, and she's a teacher called by God. Welcome, Marilyn.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Looking forward to talking to you. And then Dr. Emory Berry Jr., the pastor of the historic Green Forest Community Baptist Church. And many of you know of this church, but you're going to learn more about him. He is an amazing pastor and leader. He did his undergraduate studies at the University of Florida, Gainesville. I think that's the Gator Age school.
Yes,
And did his Master's of Divinity at Emory University's Candler Theological Seminary, as well as his doctorate in ministry at the Samuel Proctor School. He has had an incredible journey as a pastor, but also as a leader who teaches and who has a school at his church. Welcome, Dr. Berry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wright.
So good to have both of you here. I want to kick this off really with just a little bit more background from each of you about what you're doing and how you're leading and why it's important to students and parents and teachers today. And so I want to begin with you, Marilyn. You're a teacher, you're an innovator, you're an author. Tell us just a little bit about your journey to Teachers Who Pray.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. My journey, I like to say I became a teacher on 9/11. I was actually a reporter in New York City, and I had been doing the job for about 7 years out of college and working my way up the ladder. And I was on duty on 9/11. And it was a moment that I just was a pivotal moment in my life and in so many other people's lives. And I heard the Spirit of God tell me that I'm a teacher first, then a journalist. And I had been teaching Sunday school at my church, in a storefront church in Harlem. And I just loved being around the children every week. I was just pour all my heart and soul into it, but that was the church thing I did, not how I made a living. And God brought those two together on 9/11. And about 6 months later, I moved back to my hometown, Chicago, and I started a teaching program to get a master's in education. And I can tell you more about what happened when I entered the classroom.
I want to hear about that. And of course, you mentioned you were working in Harlem. You went to a school in Harlem that I went to, Columbia University.
Yes.
We call it Morningside Heights, but we know it's Harlem.
We know it's Harlem.
So I do want to get a little deeper into that, but let's hear just a little bit of background of our other guest, Dr. Berry. Go ahead and tell us, sir.
All right. Greetings again. Thank you, Dr. Wright. And I'll say that my story as well, like Marilyn, came kind of unexpectedly. Growing up in South Florida, Miami, to a great family, it was discovered when I was in the second grade that I was not reading at grade level. Teacher, who was also my Sunday school teacher as well, informed my mother that I was calling words, but not necessarily comprehending the words. And make a long story short, I started the second grade in the lowest reading group, but had a committed teacher who, God bless Miss Courtney, she just poured into this struggling young little boy and just was determined to help me. And I started out the second grade in the lowest reading group. And by the time we finished, I had surpassed everybody in the class. And so for me, just my love for teachers began very early because the trajectory and much of what you shared today probably would not have been possible without my parents, but definitely without my second grade teacher. And so I always say that from there, the rest is history. But I saw the impact very early that a teacher can have on a child's life.
Wow. And you actually have a school at your church.
We do. So the quick story is that Dr. George McCaleb was one who began pastoring Green Forest in 1979. Metro Atlanta was exploding with people from all over the country. And there were a lot of latchkey children who were left at home as their parents were out in the Metro Atlanta area working. And what began really as an after-school program, the parents really were satisfied with the tutoring and some of the things that were happening after school, that they asked him to begin starting a school. And so they began with those initial children in kindergarten, and they just added a grade each year. And so we now have a K-3 through 12 school. So 14 grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school. And the school has now been in existence for over 30 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. Of course, no one wants to be Joshua, following the footsteps of a legendary leader and spiritual influence on the Atlanta and the national area like Pastor McCaleb did, but you obviously are up to the task and prepared for it.
Thank
so
you.
With COVID-19 still having an impact on us nationwide, we want to explore how the faith community can navigate this return to the classroom or a resort to virtual learning. How's this going to affect teachers and parents and students, and what's the role the church can play as we support these groups going through this? And so the two of you obviously have incredibly important experiences to share, and I want to dive right into that. But I want to begin with you, Marilyn, and I want to call you Dr. Marilyn. I know you're working on your doctorate, and how's that coming for you before we jump into this?
I just finished a final exam an hour before this webinar.
Wow.
So it's rolling. We're in the midst. Yes.
Somebody watching will be praying that you get everything you need on that exam. And so tell us about the founding of Teachers Who Pray. What is it, and what did you have in mind when starting this organization? And then relate that to what we are going to see as teachers and as parents as we face the days ahead.
So when I started teaching in 2003, when I entered into the classroom, there were a number of challenges, okay, that was set before me in the District of Chicago and especially other urban districts. One, it was overcrowding, just the demands of students, and not just, even when I had a smaller class, the levels varied so widely that it was just hard to be everything to every child, and you saw the needs. So when God has placed a desire to educate in your spirit, 99 is just not good enough. And you want to give your heart and soul. At the time when I started, I had one child. I had 3 children as a teacher ultimately, and it was just pulling on me: home life, school life, etc. So fast forward to today in COVID, all of those circumstances still exist. The poverty that I saw in 2003 initially that broke my heart exists, is exacerbated because of COVID-19. Teachers are under an enormous amount of pressure. Sometimes if they're going remotely now, they still may have children at home that they need to educate. And then just absenteeism had been an issue, and even more so online when children just don't show up. What do you do? So this is the time to pray as never before. And Teachers Who Pray is designed so that teachers won't have to go through what I went through, which was high amounts of stress and anxiety and frustration and feeling hopeless and wanting to quit, but just going back and forward about, I can't quit, God called me. And just banding together with like-minded educators in that building, because you're not the only one in that building who believes in prayer, trust me. And just locking arms and building the stamina that you need to get through the day, and not just get through the day, but get through the day with a level of excellence that you can be proud of.
So how do teachers connect with Teachers Who Pray?
Yes, so we have a website, teacherswhopray.org, and that is the hub site. We also have platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter that we use to connect with one another. We have a twofold strategy, which is we want to build clusters in the schools of praying teachers. We want every school to have their own chapter of Teachers Who Pray. And then you turn to the mothership or the headquarters, the website, and things like that for more additional inspiration and encouragement, because we're discipling teachers to disciple teachers. We are lifting up the model that Jesus gave us, which is everybody has a ministry,
Fantastic.
not just the main hub. So that's essentially what we do.
Now, Dr. Berry, you've got a church that has a school. I'm sure all your teachers pray. But what things did you consider as you thought about starting school this year? And tell us, are you going virtual or hybrid, or is everybody going to be there? And how did you make that decision?
Great question. So we are actually virtual to begin the semester. And one of the things that I did early on was form a coronavirus task force. One of the beauties of being a pastor is that there are people who come from all walks of life, every industry. And so we're fortunate to have several physicians in our congregation, and I pulled them together to ask if they would serve on a task force. And I really sought to rely on them as, if you will, boots on the ground who are kind of in that field to help provide wisdom and guidance. And so they've been a great source for us in our decision making. And so we decided to go virtual. And what's interesting, in the midst of that, we realized that obviously our concern was the health considerations that needed to be that we need to be mindful of. But the other parts, we realized that the workforce, what do you do with students whose parents have to work? They don't have the luxury of working remotely. Then we realized that there were many students who didn't have internet in the home, or there were not enough devices in the home. Maybe there was a laptop or a tablet. And then lunch, meals. We realized as well that many of the students around the country really rely, and then where our church is located, rely on school breakfast and lunch. And so it's interesting. I'll kind of sum up my answer to say that I personally have had to kind of think through what this looks like in a COVID world. As a parent of a 9th grade son and a 3rd grade daughter, I've had to think it through. My wife is also an administrator. She's an assistant principal. And so she's literally from sun up to sundown having to navigate with her own other coworkers and students and families. And then I also teach at Emory University as a adjunct professor there. So at every level, from the elementary to the collegiate level, I've had to think it through. So I think 3 quick things that I would offer for a pastor or for a church that's thinking. I would encourage every church, if possible, to try to adopt a school. And you'll be surprised that many schools do have a school budget, but they could really utilize the human resources and the financial resource that a church could offer. The other is, I would say, tutoring. And so many of the parents, as we all have heard, parents who has a child, by the time they reach 8th or 9th grade, you hear some parents or grandparents say, listen, this is new math, or this is, I don't remember any of this stuff. And so I think there may be some ways to do some virtual tutoring. And then I would also say lunch prep or meal prep. And so in every neighborhood, there's someone who's watching today whose kids are gone and grown. And maybe you can just, in your neighborhood, offer a gift card or offer to pick up some groceries. And that's one less thing a parent has to worry about. And so those are some of the, I have some others, but those are a few that I would.
Those are great suggestions. And for sure, these are things that are important. I loved your first point, pastors and church leaders and even community leaders. See who you have in your environment. You brought your medical professionals together to help you craft your strategy. And
Yes.
then you gave some just really good ideas about how we can support teachers in our schools, both with adopting schools, doing tutoring, and thinking about meal prep, all things that any church could do of any size that could be very, very helpful. Now, Marilyn, how has Teachers Who Pray kind of pivoted in the COVID situation? What are you doing differently, or what are you recommending that would support teachers? And of course, you're a person of faith and a follower of Jesus Christ. Maybe you've got some church-specific strategies as well you want to share with us.
Yes, well, COVID hit right at the time in the spring where we have our annual conference. So we had to postpone it, and we thought maybe it would, pass, but it hasn't. So we never had it, but we are preparing. We did take our prayer call. So every month, every week on a Monday, we have a prayer call, Monday nights from 7 to 8:30 p.m.
Can anybody get on that call?
Anybody can get on the call that registers on our Zoom link.
Okay.
And so that's Central Time. And so
let's go back to the website, teacherswhopray.org. Is that
yes,
right?
yes, you'll see the information on there.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, so we moved that from an actual telephone call to a Zoom video call. And we did a tremendous amount of prayers. We had teachers from Maine to California calling in, and a lot of us had seen each other for the first time in 5 years. We've been praying on the phone. So it was beautiful connections that we've made. And some prayer groups obviously had to go online with their teacher prayer group individually at different schools. So it's just the new normal for now that we do everything virtual. I would say that churches are an extremely important part of Teachers Who Pray growing and scaling, because as you mentioned, every church has teachers. As a matter of fact, teachers are one of the top plenteous professions in America in the workforce. And a 2019 PDK poll showed that 37% of the teachers said that they were evangelical. And we know that that's a very specific form of like identifying as a Christian. So it's even more than 30%, 37% of the population. Teachers Christian teachers are in these buildings, and the church is within us. So when we come into the building, we don't need permission to pray. We can pray, and it makes a world of difference. And so having that message come through the pulpits is essential, because a lot of teachers don't realize that they have a First Amendment right to pray amongst each other, not to proselytize to the children, which we never do, but we do pray amongst ourselves, and we live Jesus. We are desiring to be the church, not just say we're the church. And that shows up so tremendously. And the children will ask us questions. And if they ask us if we're Christian, we can answer, yes, we are. We can say what we believe if we're asked by, and even in public schools, we won't get in trouble, get fired for that. There are so many different ways to witness and shine the light of Jesus in schools. We don't have to hide our candle under a bushel. And that is the message of Teachers Who Pray. That is, and we need the support of pastors, and they need to understand that we're not trying to cross the separation of church and state boundary, but we're actually trying to live in the freedom that we have as American citizens to gather amongst like-minded teachers and call on the name of Jesus in that building and claim authority over the atmosphere. And it does make a difference. It makes a world of difference. And I'm a witness to it. I survived and I thrived in the classroom for 14 years in Chicago public schools, only by the grace of God and only because I knew that in my own power, I couldn't do the job that God was calling me to do and had called me to do. But through prayer, He gave me the power to do it and to tell other teachers and empower them to do it.
Amen. Okay. Now, I got to say this, Dr. Berry, you've got a school at your church. I'm sure your teachers pray, but
Yes, sir.
tell us what is going on to support the spiritual life of the teachers at your school. How does that work? What does that look like? Do they gather for prayer? Is there a spiritual component of their leading that you can describe for us?
Sure, absolutely. So prior to the sheltering in place in our chapel, the teachers would gather every morning in the chapel, and they would pray one for another. And so it would be great as a parent when I would take off my pastor hat and bring my children there to school at the church to see the teachers kind of flooding out of the chapel on their own without any coercing or, if you will, suggestion by the administration. So they are continuing through the use of technology, which is amazing, to be able to pray virtually. In addition to that, I lead a 7 a.m. prayer call every Monday through Friday. And so that's also been a spiritual place of support for them during this pandemic.
That's fantastic. You know, there've been a number of initiatives over the years. I'm thinking in particular of Bishop Henry Williamson from the CME Church, who has been very instrumental in leading churches adopting schools in their communities. And I think we often think about that from the perspective of the children, but obviously there's a critical component when a church adopts a school and embraces its teachers who may or may not be their members in their spiritual walk. That's a phenomenal point that you both have brought out for us, the need for churches to support their teachers and their communities. I want to pivot a little bit. You know, there's a lot of home learning going on as schools, public schools go virtual. But before COVID, there's always, not always, but for many decades and years been homeschooling. And how do you feel about homeschooling, Marilyn Rhames, as a teacher and in the public and more traditional school settings? What's your view on homeschooling? And I want to come to you on that as well, Pastor.
Sure.
Yes, so I support homeschooling. I think that it is important for parents to know that they are the first teachers. They are absolutely the first teachers. Now, can all parents homeschool? No, because of work schedules, or maybe because of their own educational attainment, they might not feel qualified. But I have homeschooled my child for a year in 7th grade, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in teaching, because I got to know my child in a way that I hadn't known her before. Mm-hmm. And I will say that this is something that a lot of families have not been able to do because of economics in the African American community, because both parents are working, or maybe there's a single parent that has to work. But prior to COVID-19, African Americans were the demographic that was leading homeschooling. Like, there was a surge in homeschooling in the African American community. Why? Because, like me, you send your kids to school and they may not be learning the way they need to learn. Mm-hmm. And so I had to stop and make time into my life and my schedule for my daughter, who was doing terribly in math. And by the time she finished with homeschooling, she was like a grade level behind. She was 2 grade. She surpassed 2 grade levels. She caught up and went a whole nother grade level above. So I am a proponent of homeschooling if it's possible, and if all the conditions are there. And I will say that this is something that we really do need to look at in the African American community, because if you look at the statistics, our numbers are dismal in terms of how our children are being educated. And that there's a number of reasons behind that I don't have time to go into. But I will say that I've come to understand, in all the work that I've done in education, that that's a conversation we do need to have in our churches more now than ever. And because COVID has pressed upon us, our schools are closed, and younger children do not learn well virtually. They just don't.
Be
And
specific on that. You have an age cutoff? What do you think is too young to be sticking them in front of a screen?
oh, I don't have the research in front of me right now, but I can tell you that I have a 6-year-old. He spent kindergarten half the year in front of the screen. He had a great relationship with his teacher. And at that time, he was in a private school and it was only 7 kids in the class. So it was more manageable than having 25 kids in a kindergarten class trying to do it virtual. And I was also there to help and his older siblings. But I can tell you, even with the 7 kids in the class, it was like, okay, stop talking, be quiet, pay attention. And even trying to, someone had to sit with him almost the entire time he was in front of that screen. So I would say, I don't know, maybe 3rd grade and younger is really difficult. But that's what our children are like. This is what the reality is right now. So we're going to have a lot of catch up to do for our children. And we know if children aren't reading by 3rd grade, the chances of them, graduating from high school or even ending up in jail later goes way up. And we cannot have that. So that's why at this point, homeschooling especially is something that I'm proposing as a good thing to lean into it, get to know your child. Yes, it's tough. Yes, it's challenging, but if you can take that extra step, it's worth it. It'll pay itself off in the long run.
Marilyn Rhames, founder of Teachers Who Pray, says homeschooling is okay, and especially for younger children. And to hear that from a public school teacher, from a teacher's advocate is important. Dr. Berry, what about homeschooling? What's your view? You want them to come to your school at your church, or are you okay with homeschooling?
So believe it or not, I'm actually as well. I'm okay, and I'm a proponent of it as a public school product myself, as well as my wife, my siblings, parents, etc. I'm a big public school proponent, but I also realize that there are a lot of deficiencies, if you will, and shortcomings, a lot of cons that also come with that setting. And so I realized that for many years, we kind of funneled everyone to embrace the same paradigm. And so one of the first hurdles that we had to jump was just private school education just for our own children. So even prior to going to Green Forest, we went into the private school model. So again, public school products. My wife isn't, in the system, but we even ourselves had to realize what was best for our children was the private school setting. So then to go, as you mentioned, a step further as relates to homeschooling, just as I've learned how children learn differently. And so much of education is not just the scholastic component, but it's also the character development, so on and so forth. And in many school settings, that you have a group of children that come from a lot of different places in life. And the things that you're trying to instill and teach to your students may not necessarily be the same values of the students they're interacting with. So those kids introduce and teach. And before you know it, your kid knows all type of websites that you may have tried to block at home, channels, conversations. And so, but I think homeschooling could be very beneficial, not just from a scholastic standpoint, but from the overall holistic standpoint of a child. Because you think about it, a teacher who is stressed, pulled in a lot of different directions, having to manage, challenges, in addition to the spectrum scholastically that children may be on, it could be a bit much for one person to try to deposit. And I know there are many who may be watching and say, well, teachers and generations in the past, or, why is it so problematic now? I think that now, as Marilyn said, we have some other options that we've been exposed to. I think it's worthwhile to really investigate in it, to use her language, to lean in as a consideration. So at the end of the day, I want to see productive, healthy, intelligent children who are, as the young people say, being their best selves in a position to live their best lives. And so I'm saying whatever works, try it.
So Green Forest Community Baptist Church, you've got a school. You just, as pastor, Dr. Berry, essentially advocated homeschool. Do you have homeschooling parents in your church that you're aware of, and how are you supporting them?
Sure, absolutely. So, in fact, my daughter's best friend, and who she loves dearly, her parents recently decided that was going to be the best option, and so what? And the circumstances, for that family, I think other families are, when you look at whether it be paying private school tuition, and but you're pretty much the teacher at home and residence. I think that's a reason to support a person who's decided homeschooling. Um, Perhaps when they see the child's potential, that they see, as Marilyn said, that they could accelerate, and even just my own narrative. I was able to go again, a class public school, the lowest reading group by myself, to accelerate to the top reading group by myself, and that, like, her daughter to be several grade levels ahead reading was the direct result of individualized instruction and support from a teacher. And so the one-on-one instruction, you can't beat it. And I know that there are many who might even wrestle with the socialization of a child. There's so many things that are available now that I think you can still find a way to still socialize your child with other kids and they not have any deficits. COVID presents some new challenges, but I think you can, if you're deliberate, can kind of map it out, and to the benefit of your child.
I think that one of the things that's just the reality that we're looking at is people are just having to spend a lot more time at home and a lot more time at home with their children.
Sure.
You both have given great examples and ideas for leaning into the educational and reading and other development of our children. But what about the spiritual environment? What can parents do in the home, Marilyn, if you think about it? What did you do to have a faith-filled environment and share your faith while you're educating your children at home? How did you do that? Give us some advice.
Yes, that was when I said it was my best teaching experience. It was because I got to bring the word of God into the lessons. And that's something that I couldn't really overtly do as a public school teacher unless I was teaching on the Bible, like as an academic, lesson on figurative language or something like that. So I would begin my class with my daughter in prayer and have her pray, like teach her how to pray by example and hear her prayers and see how they evolved over time. We did a Bible study every day. She read all 4 Gospels that year and journaled about what she learned about Jesus. And so we factored in reading in the lesson by doing Bible study. And so she had reading, writing, speaking, listening, all of those things just in the study of the Word of God. So it wasn't separate from academic learning. And so there is just so many opportunities to pour into your child and like the socialization. One thing that I think homeschooling allows is for you to socialize with your child. You get to know your child in a way that you might not have known them before and hear their thoughts in a deeper way. And so that is, for me, that's like the beauty of homeschooling. If I can just narrow it down, that's the biggest benefit of homeschooling is just having that time with your child and being able to let the conversation go where it needs to go. And if you need to, your schedule maybe more flexible and just so many different options that you can do instead of like being in the house. You can go for a walk and just talk about your neighborhood and your environment and how that pertains to what you read in the Word of God. Just different things.
So you're highly educated. You've been to an Ivy League school. You're working on your PhD. For some, it may seem even intimidating to think about the idea of homeschooling their child? I mean, for somebody who's considering this whole task of taking on homeschooling or even effectively supporting the at-home learning that's going on, what can you say to encourage or maybe give people a little bit more comfort that this is a task that they could take on and succeed at?
That's a very interesting question, and I think it's one that's very real because we've been taught to think that the teacher is the teacher, right? But we, the parents, are the first teachers. And of course, there are some things that, like, I wouldn't feel comfortable teaching chemistry if my high school daughter, if I was homeschooling. So I would want to get support in that area. But I think I have evolved myself on this topic because I used to look at homeschool as like something, honestly, that wealthier white people did. And you had to have, a two family income or a strong income in one direction in order to make it work. But I think the African American community is waking up to the idea that the revolution will not be televised. Sometimes we have to take drastic measures, and really, the Bible does talk about instructing our children and saying, do it on a daily basis all the time. And sometimes that means homeschooling. I'm not saying, and I do know that, some people won't fit the bill for it. And in those cases, I encourage them not to do it because we don't want child abuse. We don't want, like, if you're too frustrated, don't try to do it. But I'm saying it can be done. And once you get over that intimidation factor, you'll be able to see there's a lot of supports online, free material. Like, it does take work, but you can do it.
So don't be intimidated if homeschooling is something you're thinking about doing, but you don't feel equipped. Many people feel that way. You can do it. Yeah. Marilyn Rhames, teachers who pray. And I guess that would get you praying too. If you took
that would get you praying. There's so many online supports as well. Yeah. There are all kind of groups that are out there to support this issue. But with COVID, and when we see that our children are not being serviced, even if they are going to school, because there are plenty of schools that are reopening.
Yeah.
We need to consider if that is an option.
We're going to come back to that. There are definitely some national groups of African Americans who are involved in schooling, and there are other things that we can address there. But I'm glad to welcome back Dr. Emory Berry from Green Forest Community Baptist. And I want to get your take on how we can create more faith-filled environments for many parents and others who are watching who know that parents are having to face this at-home learning environment, but also want to imbue that experience with something that is faith-forming and faith-building. What can you share with us that a parent can do, or someone who is now, in the situation that they're having to teach or support the teaching going on in the home?
Sure. So I would first begin by saying just to embrace, in the words of our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama, as we heard on Monday, it is what it is. And I think that we have to first just embrace the reality that we are in this COVID-19 world, that we're in the midst of a pandemic. And I think that a lot of energy could be redirected into not just being frustrated at the fact that it's a reality. It is what it is. It's not going away anytime soon. And that, I would say making the mental adjustment. And so just praying, God, help me to accept that it is what it is for this season, whether it be the next 6 months or, as they say, 18 months, that we might go an entire academic school year. And so I think that that's helpful. And since I am a pastor, since this is a Christian platform, something that really blessed me when the viewers get an opportunity to look at the book of Acts, chapter 28, verses 30 and 31. To put it simple, the last two verses in the book of Acts. When you get a chance, go back and look at the last two verses in the book of Acts, and you will find that during that time, the Apostle Paul was under house arrest. And the Bible says for 2 years, he did ministry from his home. And I can tell you that for myself personally, the Lord really used that to settle my spirit into looking at the reality that Paul for 2 years had to figure out how to do ministry from home. And that scripture talks about people came from all over and he spread the gospel from there. So as a pastor, and I'm going to transition to your question as it relates to a parent, but I think spiritually, I had to figure out to say, listen, Paul's mindset wasn't, I'm going to wait till I get back to the church or the synagogue to resume and pick up where I left off. No, he had to figure out, and his reality for 2 years, that's a long time, 365 times 2. And so that helped me settle my spirit that it is what it is. And but I think also in that is that I think there's some value in the instruction and teaching that can come from home. Again, when you look at the book of Acts, so I just share with you what happens at the end of Acts. But if you rewind and go to Acts chapter 2, you will find that on the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit fell, that happened in the house. The Bible says they all were filled. They were in the house when the Holy Spirit fell. And so if you put those two bookends together, what happened? So what happens at the beginning of Acts and the end of Acts is what happens in the home. And I believe that God is using this COVID pandemic moment to show us that the next move of God, I believe, is what happens in the home, not necessarily in the school building, not necessarily in the church building, not necessarily in the White House building, but what takes place in the home. So I think that there's some spiritual alignment, recalibration to take place to say that perhaps God is doing something that is that he wants, that he needs to happen through my home. And so I think that's a first mental adjustment. I think it's important to start out each day praying with your children. And so I think that that's a great way. And it's a beautiful thing, especially when you have young children, to hear them pray. I mean, they pray for the dog, they pray for the flowers, but you get a chance to hear what's important to them. But even as your children get older and you listen to them pray, allow them to pray in the mornings, you'd be amazed at what they articulate. You'll be amazed about their maturity, but also you'll be amazed at the things that are troubling them and the things that they're praying about. And it gives you, if you will, some insight into how you might parent or lead or even teach better. So there are many more I could share, but I think those are the two, is making the mental adjustment. Hey, we're going to be in this for a little while. That perhaps God is doing something awesome through the home. That's Bible, Acts 2, so the beginning of Acts, the end of Acts, the move of God happens in the home. And then I think, and then just praying, listening. So the first part was what you need to do within yourself. The second is with your child, give a model for them that opportunity to pray, but listen, you'll be amazed at what they might provide for you.
A good word from Dr. Emory Berry, pastor of Green Forest Community Baptist Church. And somebody needed that sermon, and you just gave them a sermon series. Take them through Acts. What starts in the home in chapter 2 and what ends in Paul's home in the last chapter is a word for all of us. Yes, I got it. We appreciate that. And certainly it's definitely important to make certain that we help model and encourage the prayers of our children. I know God answers prayer. I can tell you that right now. I was praying you'd be right back in here. Anyway, I want to shift to Marilyn Rhames, founder of Teachers Who Pray. Let's focus on teachers for just a minute. What are the issues teachers are facing that most of us don't see and that we need to think about, especially during this time of the COVID crisis?
Woo. There's so many things.
Give us the big ones. Well, because we miss it as parents. We have our kids, we send them out to y'all sometimes, and now they're back with us, and we're seeing some stuff we have that you're used to seeing. But tell us, what are y'all facing? What should the community, what should our community be praying for their teachers right now? There may be a very specific list that's coming out of Teachers Who Pray. Go for it.
So I did a whole TEDx talk on this. It's called Why Faith Will Fix Education. And the premise of that talk is that teachers are human. but our teaching, the act of teaching, is divine. How do we get the teachers how do we bridge the gap between the divinity of our work and the humanity of our teachers? We need to pray. And that is how we fulfill that gap. And a lot of times people don't see teachers as human. They see teachers as robots and widgets. Like, we are magical. And like, we don't cry. We don't get cancer. We don't have divorce. All of our children listen to us, and they clean their room and make their beds every day. And we go happily off to school. They don't see the stress that we are under. And I'm telling you, some of the stories that have come out of our Teachers Who Pray prayer group, when we giving prayer requests, you would say, you get up every single day and you do such a fabulous job with those children, 30 of them. And you're going through this. I was one. I have a story to tell about how I would wipe my tears and get in there and be a rock star every day. And that's because, well, maybe not every day, but often enough. And that's because somebody was praying for me, and I knew that teacher down the hall, I had her back in prayer. And so what parents need to know is to cut teachers some slack, but not too much slack. We do need to be held accountable because we have a job to do. And I never want to say that all teachers are doing their very best, because I know that's not true. That's not true in any profession.
Sure.
But what I can say is that most teachers came into this profession to do a wonderful job, and they get beat up by the system or just by feeling inadequate and being inadequate, because honestly, we're all inadequate. God is what fills in the gaps. So we need to work in tandem with the with the parents, and we need to cut the parents some slack too. Sometimes the teachers blame the parents for everything, and the parents are blaming the teachers. We need to end the blame game. We need to say what needs to be done and hold each other accountable and come to an agreement and say, this is what I'm going to do. Can you do this? If you can't do this for me, mom or dad, can you do this?
That's
and
good.
I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. And we're going to come to an agreement, and we're going to support each other and not be adversarial. I don't know how many times I've been yelled at by parents when at the end of the school year, they have to come and apologize because they realize that what I was saying wasn't an attack on them. It was really to help their child. And so these are things that is so important, but I did not know what I was getting into when I quit my journalism job and came to Chicago to be a teacher, because those students in the classroom weren't well-dressed and polished like my Sunday school students were on Sunday morning. And that's the reality. Every problem that you see in society, the school is a microcosm of that community.
Absolutely.
And so we get every pain, every hurt that happens in those neighborhoods, we get those in our classrooms. And it's our job to mitigate the pain and say, you know what, when you're here, you're loved. I'm going to take care of you. We're going to have a good time, because if I'm not having fun, you're not going to have fun. If you're not having fun, then I'm not going to have fun. So let's try to have some fun here and learn a whole lot. And that is what just makes me, you can see, I just get so happy. School should be a happy place.
Dr. Wright, if I may, I'm sorry, can I add a little to that? And
Go
so
right ahead.
I think your question is just, all your questions have been great. And so one of the things that I'm seeing, just checking, doing wellness checks with teachers and those in the educational system in my congregation, but even, so I mentioned my wife as an assistant principal in the public school, my sister-in-law, both on both sides, both of my brothers, all of us have educators. And, but one of the things that I think that many don't realize is that it's one thing to teach in front of an audience or a group of human beings, flesh and blood. It's another to try to provide instruction through a screen. And I can tell you, if you talk to any pastor, they can tell you it's a totally different dynamic preaching to a red light or a white light. The dynamics change. And so you take a person who's a rock star, to use Marilyn's language, as an instructor in the classroom, but you put them behind a computer. If they don't have the skill sets, they're having to learn new platforms now to deliver. You take a person who was, batting 100 is now batting, 50%. And so I think that that's something that there's a lot of training that a lot of teachers, many who, have 25 years who, they know the profession well, but now they're having to provide instruction. And the reality is that even the most recent graduates who finish college and who've come out of universities, nothing in their curriculum prepared them to be able to be an online instructor. And so I think that that's something that a lot of teachers don't really know how to, post assignments, how to grade. And so in addition to just providing instruction and in the physical classroom, maybe some behavioral management, now they're having to be tech support. Because now students saying, well, hold on, Miss Dr. Wright, before you move on to the next lesson, how do you chat? How do you, and so now you talk about the pause and as I'm even listening on my own children, and then you couple that with a parent who's, maybe nearby and they can't navigate. So, the whole learning model is, and I say this in love, but I've told my wife, I said, at best, this is an experiment. And I belong to a pastoral alliance here in the Metro Atlanta area. And we have met with our school superintendent, brand new, actually, she's from New York. And we have had meetings to try to figure out how can we help advocate, what resources do you need? And then similarly with our school board chair. And on the first day of school here, the system crashed. And of course, the media, they were looking for a great news story, which, by the way, this is my little plug. Marilyn, one of the things I love about reporters, I have tons of friends of reporters, and I always say in every major city, there are amazing things that happen every day, but the lead story is usually the worst thing that happens. Yes. And so that was, the media on Monday. But one of the IT personnel in our county is a member. She was on that prayer call, and I normally take prayer requests. She was just so overwhelmed. She's like, listen, we are so right now at best, I think many are just trying to do the best that they can. And I think there are some teachers who would like to develop their IT acumen. But unfortunately, there have been many who have checked out already. And many who, as you mentioned, were maybe subpar teachers in person. Now they have even taken a deeper plummet. You put them in front of a device. So it's a lot to consider.
Well, as we get ready to wrap up, I want to frame this in terms of a prayer request. So Marilyn Rhames, Teachers Who Pray, what's the number one prayer request that our audience should be lifting up for the teachers who you're serving through Teachers Who Pray? What's the number one thing that you feel and you believe people should be praying for our teachers?
Well, unlike a lot of the major big school districts in the country, smaller school districts all over this country are opening their doors this year. And a lot of teachers are afraid for their own health for that reason. But then there are a lot of teachers who are so excited to get back to work, despite the danger. So I pray that the virus would not harm any of our teachers or students, that God would put a hedge of protection around the schools that are opening, and that none of them would see a fatality or major illness because the kids came to school to learn. Because I can tell you, there's a sense of desperation in parents who have to send their kids back to school. It's trepidation. And I had it too. I have one kid that is going back to school here in Arkansas, where I'm in Arkansas at the University of Arkansas. And one, I couldn't send her. She's asthmatic. And as much as I wanted her to start 9th grade, I couldn't do it because I didn't want anything. So I'm taking a risk too. But I'm just praying for all. But the excitement at the school where my son is going was palpable. The teachers were excited. They were like, we're going to do this. So just pray that the virus would behave, as the grandma would say, the virus would behave and that everybody be safe, and we'd have a learning environment for our children and our teachers.
Great prayer. Now, Dr. Berry, you got another set of teachers in your context. You're in a church. There's Sunday school teachers. And
Yes, sir.
here at UMI, we love Sunday school teachers.
Yes, sir.
All Christian education teachers. How have your Christian education programs in your church adopted to this new context? Are they streaming? Are they meeting? And how can we pray for them?
Sure, absolutely. Great question, Dr. Wright. And as you know, part of the model that the Lord used Pastor McCaleb to develop was a strong Sunday school. And so prior to COVID, we had 120 Sunday school classes, or small groups, as many say. And on Wednesdays, we have at least 40. So what we did is that we are utilizing the Zoom format as a way of, initially, we just had 4 large group umbrella groups, adults, teens, children, etc. But Zoom also has something called breakout rooms. And so we have utilized that. So we're not back up to the 120 or the 40, but we are expanding in phases. And that has been instrumental. And we are still utilizing not just technology, but there are many who still desire to have books. And so we're still purchasing, not at the same scale, but also literature, because there's some who the lesson isn't a lesson unless they have the Sunday school book. So that's the shift that so it's been a big lift for us. And but I'm so proud that most of our congregation has embraced the change. And for that, I'm grateful. And so my prayer, I think, would be that that God would just touch hearts. That's really, we often celebrate that the miracles that Jesus performs, but I think the biggest miracle is that God changes hearts. So my prayer is that that pastors' hearts will be touched to adopt a school. My prayer is that adults will be touched to offer to be a tutor to a student. And then my prayer is that someone's heart will be touched to help sponsor a family in their neighborhood to help with meals.
Fantastic. So we have been talking with Marilyn Rhames, the founder of Teachers Who Pray, the author of the book, The Master Teacher. She's an educational consultant, a person who has stood in the gap for teachers and does that. If you go to teacherswhopray.org, you can connect on their prayer line. When is it? Wednesday nights? Is that what you said?
It's Monday nights, but I'm glad you said that because we are on summer break and we definitely did that on purpose. So we will start back up September, I want to say 14th.
But teacherswhopray.org. And then Dr. Emory Berry, who is the pastor of the Green Forest Community Baptist Church, following in the footsteps of Pastor McCaleb.
Yes,
both of you, we are so grateful and thankful for you to be here. We're going to pause for a moment and pray, as we just said, for the teachers who are out there. And Lord, we do lift them up. We pray that you would bless our teachers, keep them safe. We pray for pastors and leaders that they would adopt the schools and the learners and educators in their communities, and that you would indeed bring an end to this virus. Lord, we just leave it to you, and we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Thank you for joining us today. And we're going to have to come back and talk some more about this education thing. You guys opened up quite a few areas that I know that our audience is deeply, deeply concerned about and interested in. Thank you so much again to Marilyn Rhames and to Dr. Emory Berry. Thank you, and God bless.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Wright.
Thank you so much.